This is Basket Case Clubs, CPR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. G'day everyone and welcome to another episode of CPR Group's podcast, Basket Case Clubs. Hopefully we're still doing our job right, and given that we've had a few more showcases in the last few weeks and indeed 100 new subscriptions, Steve, we've reached our first milestone. Yay.
Woo-hoo.
G'day, Steve. Welcome.
G'day. How are you? Good
I'm
to be back.
fantastically well.
Good, very good. Yes, it is really rewarding to see people actually listening to our podcast. I know that my 11-year-old son was right into one of the episodes in the car the other day, and I kind of turned to him and I said, "Huds, man, you've really got to get a life." I think he was just chuffed that we have got our podcast on Spotify because, you know, all of his preferred famous music artists are on Spotify and he listens there. So to see his dad on there is pretty cool as well.
Yeah.
We can continue to convince ourselves that we're famous.
Exactly, yes. And we'll call ourselves Dude Almost Perfect.
So we're talking volunteering today, and volunteering underpins almost all that we do at CPR Group. In some way or another, the work that we do is reliant upon good volunteers who are committed to their organisations and, you know, might get involved when things aren't so great and because of their passion for their organisation, turn things around. And you've got a story to tell, Mick, which is very much focused on an organisation that wanted to turn things around but struggled to break through that barrier of doing things the way they've always been done.
Yeah, for the sake of anonymity and to protect people's privacy, I might use some different names if that's acceptable to our audience.
Okay, in this case it is. Okay.
Oh, look, but I'll call her Cynthia, and the real Cynthia knows that I use her as my poster child for volunteering. So Cynthia she now was the president of a netball association, and to protect the netball association as well, I've found one that doesn't exist. We're going to call it the Mid-Melbourne Netball Association. So Cynthia is the president of the Mid-Melbourne Netball Association, loves helping. She loves doing her job. She's probably, you know, when we do the classification of personality traits, I won't say personality types because I don't necessarily believe that there's a true personality type, but there are certainly personality traits. And we do that little example where you've got the lion, the owl, the golden retriever, and the monkey. Well, she's certainly the golden retriever. She loves keeping everybody happy. She doesn't like upsetting anyone. She doesn't like rocking the boat then. So the meetings are very congenial and they are, you get a lot of compromise, you know? So everyone's just happy to say, "Oh, look, I'd be happy to chair this meeting, but if you want to, that's okay." You know, all of that sort of stuff going on. And that's the tone of the meetings. Well, it was the tone of the meetings while she was president. And that's fine. And that's lovely, but it's not good business. And the size of Mid-Melbourne Netball Association, remember it's a fake name. Don't go looking it up and trying to find Cynthia on the web. Who is this lovely girl? They're too big to be just run by consensus or run by everyone just compromising to come up with something that keeps everybody happy, because you just can't do that. So, you know, people like that too, Steve, don't you? They're probably not called Cynthia.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And that willingness to give and to, you know, give up your time and contribute that time that you should be spending potentially with your family or watching your son or daughter play the sport, but instead you are so committed to enabling all of the kids in that organisation to play that you give up that time and you volunteer in the canteen or you get involved on the committee, which, as we'll cover shortly, people think means you have to do everything.
Yeah.
So I think that underlying mindset of philanthropy, for want of a better term, you know, giving and wanting to provide support is why we often find people like that struggle to stop.
Yeah, so wanting to help all the kids play, I think that's okay. Where it gets difficult is when you spend until 11 o'clock at night at meetings or 11 o'clock at night in the canteen counting coins instead of being at home or doing something more productive, and not understanding that if you are president of Mid Melbourne Netball Association, that means that your job is to work on the business primarily and not in the business. So it's interesting you raised the canteen, because that is where Cynthia loved spending her time. So it's fascinating. And every time I challenge her on this, she'd kind of go, "Oh, Michael, I know I'm not supposed to be there, and I know there's more important things for me to do." So she would love being in the canteen for the sole reason that I stand at the chip fryer, I cook chips, I put the chips in a bucket, I put the chips on the counter, somebody gives me money for those chips, and I put that money in the till. I can see the money going in the till there. Therefore, I know that I'm making a financial impact on the association today. And that was where Cynthia focused. But that's missing the point. That's not the job of the president. That is the job of the association. Somebody needs to make sure that that happens, or a group of somebodies needs to make sure that happens. But it's for Cynthia, the one piece of advice I gave, and I've spoken about this a lot at conferences or in speaking engagements that are specifically about what's the one piece of advice you can give to volunteers. It's this: get out of the canteen. We all have our canteen. Our canteen is our safe place, our go-to place where we know everything. We know the way things work. We know the processes. We know the structure, and we're comfortable there. But you need to sometimes get uncomfortable to be able to make the difference in business that you need to be able to make. So for Cynthia to be able to see, today I'm making a difference, today I'm putting money in the till, misses the point that today is not the president's role. The president's role on carnival days, on game days, on training nights, when the canteen is open, is to be out meeting people. The president's role is really one of, I try to summarize every role down to 2 points. Those 2 dot points each have sub dot points under them. But for president, I believe that the 2 points are to be the ambassador for the organization and to chair the meetings. So there's a lot that goes into each of those things, but if you summarize it down to those things, it really makes sense to be able to say, is it an ambassadorial job? Is that a word? Ambassadorial. We'll look it up later. Is it an ambassador? It is now.
Sounds bloody good. Let's make it a word.
Let's stick with it. Is it an ambassadorial job to be serving chips in the canteen, to be cooking burgers, to be making sandwiches, to be preparing lasagna? I don't think so. I think that is an operational task. The ambassador task at that time is to be out meeting people. Now, even at a carnival where the majority of people that I'm going to meet as Cynthia aren't going to be from my association, and they're never going to be engaged as members of my association. That doesn't matter, because it's going and meeting the people from other organisations that makes them later on post on Facebook how Mid Melbourne Netball Association's carnival is the best in the country and how we can't wait to get back there. And we travelled all the way from Port Douglas to get there.
Yeah. And what's so, the sad reality of this is that mindset of achieving something for today is a pervasive mindset amongst management committee members throughout volunteer organisations across the country and probably the world. And it's so difficult to break that habit of the way things have always been done in our organisation. And isn't it interesting that we often, in the same way that, you've just spoken about the focus of Cynthia in the canteen, cooking, selling food, making money, and feeling productive on that day, is a very similar, and I use this term without wanting it to come across too derogative, but it's that same kind of short-sightedness that leads a management committee to focus on the operational issues of today and fighting the fires that are rearing their head today, rather than thinking of 3, 5, or 10 years down the track, which, often when we ask management committee members, how different do you think your job would be today if the management committee 10 years ago thought about making your life easier by implementing some initiative, whether it's putting money aside to, help with asset replacement, or some system that makes the life of the treasurer easier, or some point of sale system in the canteen that makes the operations of that business unit systemized and a bit more efficient. And they always say, oh, that'd be great. So then we challenge them and say, okay, so why don't you start thinking now for that committee of 10 years down the track? But it's so common that people really struggle with that longer term strategic view, because often, even if it's just between their own two ears, in their own minds, they're the people who should be in the canteen because they're the president. And that's a really difficult mindset to break as well. That I've got to be at the association to open up the canteen for training night, and I've got to be there to open up the control room for game day. And
I can't go to really a training workshop for presidents because I've got to be on the sideline. I've got to,
Yeah, remember that year we ran for pre-season with we can probably name these guys. We can pick on football, can't we?
Yes, because you're a good.
So a state sporting organisation for football, as in soccer. Pre-season we ran a series of training sessions for committee members to turn up and learn some of the fundamental principles of good governance, running their organisation more strategically, and even some operational tips and tricks to make the lives of today's volunteers a bit easier. And the attendance was woeful, and it was so commonplace that the reason given for poor attendance from clubs within a zone. So, we ran a workshop per zone, and all the clubs could come in, which was such a great model because they share ideas and, share stories and come up with...
Realize they're all struggling with the same things.
Exactly. Yeah. And then collaborate to come up with good solutions for improving their operations. But they all said, oh, no, we can't make it because we've got sign on. Hold on.
Don't we have people for that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's often, sure, a lack of volunteerism. And I don't really like that term, but it captures, a willingness to volunteer. That is a reality of today's society. We have less and less people that are willing to give up their time. But there are plenty of strategies for activating those people who are out there in most organizations' membership that are really keen to help out. And we'll talk a lot more about volunteering through this podcast. But it's so sad that it's often the people themselves in those management committee positions who really struggle to give up the tasks. They've got people out there. They don't realize that those people are out there willing to help. They make the assumption that there is nobody out there. So they don't ask. They don't put in place the measures to make it easy for people to stick their hand up. And therefore we've got this, perpetual cycle of the same small group of people, as we often colloquially refer to them as the SEPs, or same eight people, who just get stuck doing everything.
Yep. So if you'd asked me about 12, 15 years ago, how do I get more people to volunteer? Because that's going to be the question on everybody's mind when they listen to anything or come to any session about volunteering. How do I get more people involved? There are some real traps to fall into. One of them is, how do we get more people on the management committee? Well, hang on a minute. What's the role of the management committee, and how do we separate our operations from our governance and our strategy? And how do we do good business and understand the lines of demarcation? Who's supposed to do what, so that we can focus on getting everything done? But we'll come back to that. But I would have said 15, 20 years ago that you need to ask nicely, you need to ask personally, and you need to ask honestly. So while I still think that there's merit in all of those, we can delve into those in more detail down the track. While I still think there's merit in all of those things, to jump back to the Cynthia story, there's a better way that works better, and it's almost foolproof. So when Cynthia's not in the canteen on any given game, let's say just a normal fixtures day, she's out on the sides of the court and she's talking to people. Now, when she first goes to meet somebody, and this is why Cynthia struggled with this, because she didn't feel comfortable going and talking to people. And like I tell my kids all the time, the right thing to do in life is usually the most difficult thing to do. So if you can think of path A, path B, path C, which is the most difficult, it's probably going to be that one. Very simple example. It's really easy to sit on the couch and eat potato chips, it's much harder to get off your bum and go for a run, which is right. It's really easy to stop at a fast food joint on the way home and pick up some dinner. It's more difficult to buy the broccoli, buy the carrots, do a nice stir fry with lean chicken or tofu, and then that's more difficult, but which is right, So the same thing is true here. It's easy to stand in the canteen and make money today. It's hard to go and meet people I don't know. But that's the job of Cynthia. Cynthia's job should have been to go and meet somebody. So the way that conversation would go is that Cynthia would approach a parent on the sideline for the first time and say, "Hi, my name's Cynthia. I'm president of the association here. How are you?" And of course, the parent on the sideline is going to go, "Oh, crap, here we go. What's she going to ask me to do?" And so there's this great level of suspicion goes, and she's, the parent's trying to find some reason to say, "I just need to be over here now."
Yeah, something just came up elsewhere.
Yeah, not standing next to you. And just to connect. But what makes that connection so much easier is that Cynthia and this other parent have something in common. They're both at netball. So already there's something over which they can connect. It doesn't have to be a cold call. It's not like a cold call. And the question can be, I love netball because I've been involved for a long time and I grew up playing and my kids played. Why do you love netball? But that's not actually as cheesy as it sounds when I say it like that. Imagine being in that situation. So the first time this happens, the other parent is going to be extremely skeptical, cynical, suspicious, and stand there with their guard up because they've been there before. I've been asked to do things before. But when Cynthia just connects and just listens to their netball story, why do you love netball? And tries to remember it, just do your best. You don't have to be keeping detailed records of this. If you've got one of those brains, fantastic. But then you say, "It's been really lovely talking to you. I'm going to go and meet some more people. I look forward to talking to you again." And the other person goes, what just happened? Like, I thought I was going to get asked to do a job. I thought she was going to say, "Hey, we need a new treasurer. Would you like to be?" And she didn't ask me to do anything. So then Cynthia spends the entire day just meeting people. And like anything where you are working on mastery, practice makes you better. It does, if you do this for 10,000 hours, and some volunteers we know, Steve, have certainly put in their 10,000 hours, you will get mastery in this area. You will become great at doing this. And that's fantastic. But you've got to practice and you've got to put in that level of effort. The next time, Cynthia goes back to that first parent and says, "Hi, I'm terribly sorry. I can't remember your name, but I know that we've met before. I'm Cynthia." And the other parent will say, "Hi, Cynthia. Yeah, it's Janet. It's Paul. It's Mark." And then they'll connect again. And you do that again, and you do that again. And then it's a hi. And if you can remember names, it's "Hi, Mark. Hi, Paul. Hi, Janet," as much as you can. And you are making friends. Now, friendship is not the most important thing in work. It's more about being trusted and people coming on your journey, particularly as president in that ambassadorial role. There you go, slipped it in again. That you can make connections that there's no other way to make. This is not something that you can cheat, and it's not something that you can short circuit. Building human relationships takes time, and there's no short circuiting that time that it's going to take. But it's just quickly,
it's a frame of mind though. Most people, even if they don't consider themselves a good people person, can still, if they try as hard as they can to put all of that, self-limiting belief to the side and not consider the fact that I'm developing this relationship with this member, for some long-term benefit of the organization, but I'm really just out there doing my job as the ambassador and meeting people. Even people who don't consider themselves a good people person still have friends. They've still managed to create meaningful relationships with other people. And that's all this is. In the first instance, you are just doing that job of making friends yourself, but you're also kind of making friends for the organization, aren't you?
Absolutely, because it's exactly that people remember. Like, the president came and spoke to me. The president of Mid Melbourne Netball Association came and spoke to me. And it was personal. And she didn't ask me to do anything. She didn't ask me to help. She didn't ask me to put up a banner. She just spoke to me and connected with me. That's what makes parents love it. That's what makes parents want to go back. That's what makes our customers love what we're offering. And you're connecting over something. There's common ground to begin with. We are connecting over something. So there are no enemies or strangers here. So it's not just cold calling. This is making friends with people who are here for the same passion that we have. Now, I, as a dad, might hate netball. I don't. I think it's great and extremely difficult to play, but I'll come back to that later. As in a lot later, not today, because it's an embarrassing story. But I'm there because my daughter loves netball. And so therefore my family is a netball family. And of course I'm going to connect. Of course I'm going to, and that's so much more fun when I go to sport because I want to go, not just because my kids want to go. I want to see my kids and I want to connect with my peers there, but the other parents.
Yeah, and the hugely vast majority of people who participate in sport,
Hugely
particularly in
vast.
Australia, hugely vast. Yep. Huge wasn't going to be enough hyperbole. Okay, so the hugely vast proportion of people who participate, and that's not necessarily play, but participate, in your example as a dad, as a volunteer, we are engaged in sport in Australia because it's a social opportunity. It's an opportunity to interact with other people, to make friends, and more and more organizations, I think, need to recognize the importance of that role that they play in people's lives. And that can include volunteering. Volunteering,
oh, yes,
for most of the people with whom we work, is fun. It's an opportunity for that social engagement. Sure, sometimes they feel really overworked and underpaid, but for most volunteers, that they've realized that it actually can be a fun activity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's then to round out the Cynthia story. It's only when she has put in that effort over time and she has become good at making friends and good at just connecting with then people that she knows, but more importantly, people that know and trust and maybe even like her, that when they see Cynthia struggle because we're a couple of people down today and there is a bit of extra work to do, so Cynthia's running around like a blue-ass fly, then somebody, Paul, Mitchell, Janet, will say, hey, Cynthia, what, you look flustered today. Is everything okay? Oh, yeah, well, we got this carnival and I've got to pick up the sausages today because Susie's away because her husband was called away to work. And so she's had to take the kids somewhere else and gymnastics has taken this. I said, whoa, hang on, I can go and get the snags for you. That's no worries. And just like that, we've got a helper. Well, it's not just like that, is it? It's like, I forget who it was, but we'll attribute it to Steve Jobs, who said something like, every overnight success took years and years to happen. And that's exactly what it's like, But, oh, she's so lucky that people just help her. No, she's not lucky. Whether she understood it because she was taught through something like a session like this, or she understood it because she's a human and understands the way that human connections work, she's done the right thing. She's worked on her mastery of just building relationships, one conversation at a time, one personal face-to-face conversation at a time. Recognizing, of course, Steve, that this is all predicated on those conversations being at least 1.5 meters distant when we get playing sport coming out of coronavirus shutdown. So to wrap up, Steve, there's a lot that we will continue to talk about volunteering and its link in the way that governance of sporting organisations in Australia really works as the hub of the wheel, and volunteer management is one of the spokes of that wheel. But to foreshadow some of the things that are coming up, if you had to summarise the principles of volunteering down to, I'll give you three principles of volunteering, what do you think they'd be?
They don't necessarily apply in chronological order, but I do have three principles which I often talk about, which are structure, culture, and nurture. And the reason that I say they don't necessarily appear in order of importance or in chronological order is that this is a cyclical thing. Volunteer management is an ongoing beast in organizations, and it's not the sort of thing that you can say, right, we've got that exactly right now, we can brush our hands and focus on something else, because volunteering, like almost everything in organizations, is all about the people, and it's all about the personal connections and relationships being meaningful to people so that they want to be involved. So when we talk about structure, we talk about getting the organizational structure right, making it easy for people to slot into roles. We talk about culture, and that's really what we're focused on today, is building a culture within an organization that leads to people wanting to help. And none of us want to see our friend, whether it's Cynthia or some other person in our lives or a volunteer in our organization with whom we enjoy sharing time, none of us want to see a friend suffer.
Struggle.
struggle. So we're always going to stick up our hand to help out a friend. Whereas if it's someone that we've had none of that meaningful engagement with and we see them flustered, we have no personal connection and therefore no personal desire to help them out.
We'll even turn the other way because it's easy.
Yeah, and everyone else is turning the other way. So all of a sudden it's even easier to do that. That's right. And then that third principle that I mentioned of nurture is highlights the importance of ensuring that our volunteers feel as though they're valued, but also even more important than that, feel as though they're contributing real value. So when that person goes to pick up the snags because Cynthia doesn't have time to do so, and then they smell those snags cooking by someone else, or maybe they stick their hand up to say, oh, I've picked them up now, I'm happy to, cook them because anyone can cook a snag.
Well, I do make them back. Just ask my wife. What happened to these sausages?
Sorry, I got distracted by the barbecue conversation.
Had nothing to do with beer, darling. I'm beer.
Yeah, but yourself from doing little things, in a voluntary capacity, you get a real kick out of it, and you think none of these people here would be eating those sausages today if it wasn't for me. So straight away, I feel as though I've contributed real value. Yep. That's the sort of thing that's going to be likely to keep me coming back and helping out. So structure, culture, and nurture. I'm sure that we'll, talk at length about each of those as our podcast progresses. But I think it's a really good way to sum up what matters in volunteer management.
Definitely. Steve, as always, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you about what makes our community sport in Australia tick today. And this is a topic that is really close to both of our hearts, and it works on both sides. So in a session that I ran yesterday, I spoke about the fact that we work on both sides of the fence. When we do community sport and recreation planning for councils or peak bodies, we're working directly with the councils and peak bodies. So for councils, that's a highly politically charged environment that has layers of bureaucracy that are often siloed. And in those contexts, it's very easy for a detached councillor or a manager, director, or even an officer to say, well, yeah, we can just build this facility and then we'll lease it to this organisation and then it'll be up to them and they'll be able to manage it all on their own. And because we understand the psychology of volunteering, because we work so closely with people, and, years ago we agreed that we don't work with clubs anymore, we work with people. And if we make great people, those great people make great clubs. So we don't need to focus on the clubs, we focus on the people. And exactly the same thing is true when we're able to bring that element to our community sport and recreation planning with councils and peak bodies. So it's far more about the psychology, and we'll certainly return to that. Steve, thank you very much again. I look forward to talking to you on next week's podcast.
So do I. Thank you for the opportunity to ramble at you again. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Not a ramble. It was all meaningful and fantastic stuff. Structure, culture, nurture. Love it.
Good. And we'll come back to it, yes, as you say. I look forward to doing so. Thanks, Mick.
See you soon.